I was alone in my trailer on set when I heard my actual name, spoken so clearly it made my blood run cold. Not my character's name, mine. And when I looked up, Jesus was standing there, but his face, it wasn't the face I'd been portraying for years. What he was about to tell me would expose a truth so urgent, so time-sensitive, that if you're watching this before October 31st, it's not an accident. I've spent years playing Jesus, studying his words, memorizing his character, but I had no idea I'd been missing the most important invitations of my entire life. Before we begin, tell me one thing you're praying for right now in the comments. I want to pray with you by name. And if you're a true believer in Christ, if you've genuinely repented, if you have saving faith, if you're truly following Jesus, please subscribe. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you've been taught about how God actually calls us. I need to know there are believers out there who are awake, watching, and ready. So, here's what happened. It was October 23rd, around 11:47 p.m. I remember because I'd just finished a 16-hour shoot, and I was sitting in my trailer, still in costume, scrolling through my phone mindlessly. You know that zombie state you get into when you're exhausted but too wired to sleep? That's where I was. I was looking at social media, just random stuff, people's vacation photos, some political argument I had no business reading, when suddenly my phone screen went dark. Not dead, just dark. And in the black reflection of that screen, I saw him standing behind me. I'm not gonna lie, I froze. My heart it stopped, or at least it felt like it stopped. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Because this wasn't the Jesus I'd been playing. This was the actual Jesus, and the difference was so profound I can't even... how do I explain this? It's like spending years painting portraits of the ocean and then suddenly being dropped into the middle of it during a storm. Jonathan, he said, my real name. Not my stage name, not the character name everyone on set calls me. The name my mother gave me. I spun around in my chair, and he was there, standing in my tiny trailer, and the presence of him, it was crushing and comforting at the same time, like being seen for the first time in your entire life, fully seen. Every secret, every failure, every pretense just gone. Lord, I managed to whisper. My voice was shaking. What are you doing here? He smiled, but it was a sad smile. I've been calling you, Jonathan, for months, but you haven't been listening. I just stared at him. I don't understand. I play you. I spend every day trying to honor you, to represent you well. I pray before every scene. I know what you do, he said gently, but there was an edge to his voice. But do you know what I'm doing? Do you hear me when I call you by name? I opened my mouth and then closed it, because honestly, I didn't know what to say. I pray, right? I read my Bible. I'm on a show about Jesus, for crying out loud. How much more spiritual can you get? But then Jesus did something that made my blood turn to ice. He waved his hand, and suddenly the walls of my trailer just dissolved. We were standing in this vast space, and I could see, oh God, I could see thousands, maybe millions of people. They were everywhere, going about their daily lives, working, eating, scrolling on their phones, arguing with their kids, sitting in traffic. Watch, Jesus said, and then I heard it, his voice, calling out names, one after another. Sarah. I saw a woman in her kitchen loading a dishwasher. She paused for just a second, like she'd heard something, but then her phone buzzed and she grabbed it, and whatever she'd heard was gone. Marcus, a man in a gym, lifting weights. He stopped mid-rep, looked around confused, but then his buddy said something to him and he laughed it off. Jennifer, a teenager in her bedroom, headphones on, scrolling TikTok. She pulled one earbud out, frowned, looked at her door like maybe her mom had called her, but then she shrugged and put it back in. Over and over and over. Jesus was calling people by name, and they were all almost hearing it. Almost. But something always interrupted. Always. Lord, I said, my voice breaking, they can't hear you. Oh, they hear me, he said, and the pain in his voice made my chest ache. They just don't recognize it's me. They think it's a random thought, a distraction, a moment of anxiety or nostalgia or stress. They explain it away. I was trembling now. But how? How are you calling them? Jesus looked at me, and his eyes were so full of love and grief, I almost couldn't stand it. The same way I've been calling you, Jonathan. Through the still, Small voice you keep mistaking for your own thoughts. Through the conviction you keep dismissing as guilt. Through the people I place in your path that you're too busy to notice. Through the doors I open that you're too afraid to walk through. My knees literally buckled. I had to grab the edge of what used to be my trailer but was now just empty space. Because I knew, oh God, I knew exactly what he was talking about. The woman at the grocery store last week, I whispered. Jesus nodded. I told you to talk to her. She was having the worst day of her life. She was planning to end it that night. I called you by name 3 times while you stood in line behind her. You thought it was just awkward social anxiety. I felt like I was going to be sick. Did she? A stranger stopped her on the bridge, Jesus said quietly. Someone who was listening when I called their name. But it could have been you, Jonathan. It was supposed to be you. Tears were streaming down my face now. I didn't know. How am I supposed to know when it's you and when it's just my own thoughts? That's what I'm here to show you, he said, because time is running out. October 31st isn't just a date on the calendar, it's a marker, a threshold. What happens on October 31st? I asked, but part of me didn't want to know. Jesus' expression grew even more serious. It's not what happens on October 31st, it's what stops happening after. Jonathan, I'm about to show you something that the church has completely missed. Something so crucial that if people don't understand it before this month ends, they're going to spend years wandering in confusion, wondering why their prayers feel empty and my voice seems silent. He waved his hand again, and the scene around us shifted. We were now standing in what looked like a massive corridor of doors. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Each one was unique. Different colors, different styles, different sizes. What are these? I asked. Invitations, Jesus said. Specific, personal invitations I extend to my people. Calls I make by name. Every single door represents a moment when I called someone to step into their next season, their next assignment, their next level of intimacy with me. I walked closer to one of the doors. It was beautiful, made of this rich wood with intricate carvings. I reached out to touch it, but Jesus caught my hand. Look at the date, he said, pointing to a small inscription. The 28th of October, 2024. This was a year ago, I said. Jesus nodded. This was for a man named David. I called him by name to start a ministry to the homeless in his city. He heard me. He even got excited about it. But then he talked to his pastor, his wife, his small group. They all had wisdom for him. They told him to wait, to be practical, to make sure it wasn't just emotion. By November, he'd convinced himself it wasn't really me. What happened to him? I asked. He's still going to the same church, sitting in the same seats, singing the same songs, wondering why he feels so empty, Jesus said. The door closed. That specific invitation expired. I've called him to other things since then, but nothing has felt the same to him. He's spent a year feeling spiritually numb, thinking something's wrong with his faith. I felt sick. But he can still serve you, right? Of course he can serve me, Jesus said. But Jonathan, do you understand the difference between serving me generally and responding to a specific call? The difference between doing good things for God and doing the exact thing I'm asking you to do in this exact moment? I thought about my own life. The projects I'd said yes to because they seemed spiritual. The opportunities I'd chased because they made sense, the safe choices, the logical choices. I've missed them, haven't I? I whispered. The doors, the invitations. Jesus put his hand on my shoulder, and the weight of it was both comforting and crushing. You've missed many, but that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to condemn you, Jonathan. I'm here to wake you up, because we're coming to the end of a season, and October 31st marks a shift. What kind of shift? A shift in how I'm calling my people, he said. Right now, in this season, I'm calling loudly, clearly, by name. I'm opening doors that are obvious, opportunities that are unmistakable. But after October 31st, the next season begins. And in that season, I'm going to require my people to have already learned how to recognize my voice, because the calls will be more subtle. The invitations will require more faith, more discernment, more courage. My mind was racing. So, you're saying if people don't learn to hear you now, when you're calling clearly, they'll be lost when I call quietly, Jesus finished. Not lost eternally, but lost in the wilderness of their own confusion. going through the motions of Christianity while missing me entirely. He turned and started walking down the corridor of doors, and I followed him. As we walked, I could see names on the doors. Some I recognized people from my church, from the show, friends, family members. Lord, I said, my voice shaking, what do I do? How do I make sure I don't miss your invitations? How do I know when it's really you calling my name? Jesus stopped walking and turned to face me. That's exactly what I'm going to show you. Over the next 3 nights, I'm going to teach you how to recognize my voice, how to respond to my invitations, and what's at stake if you don't. But Jonathan, you have to understand something. He stepped closer to me, and his eyes were blazing with intensity. The church has taught you to seek my will in all the wrong ways. They've taught you to make pro-con lists, to seek counsel, to wait for multiple confirmations, to be wise and practical. But what I'm about to show you will shatter those formulas completely, because most of the time when I call you by name, it won't make sense. It won't be practical. It won't line up with wise counsel. And if you wait for all your conditions to be met before responding, you'll miss me. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Then how? Tomorrow night, Jesus said, meet me here at midnight. What I'm going to show you about how I actually call my people will change everything. And then just like that, I was back in my trailer, alone. The walls were solid again. My phone screen was lit up with some notification I didn't care about. My costume felt suffocating, but I could still hear it, my name, whispered on a breeze I couldn't feel. And for the first time in my life, I knew it was him. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those doors, thousands of them, each one an invitation someone had missed. Each one a moment when Jesus had called a name and the person had explained it away, and I kept thinking about that woman in the grocery store, the one who was planning to end her life, the one I was supposed to talk to. I remembered her. I'd been standing behind her in line, and she was fumbling with her wallet, dropping coins, apologizing over and over to the cashier, and I'd felt this pull, this urge to say something, to ask if she was okay. But I'd dismissed it. I'd thought, don't be weird, she doesn't want some random guy bothering her. But it hadn't been my thought at all. It had been Jesus, calling me by name. The next day on set was torture. I went through all the motions, hit my marks, said my lines, smiled for the behind-the-scenes cameras, but inside I was screaming, because I kept noticing it now. These little moments, these small impulses. During lunch, I felt drawn to sit with one of the production assistants who always ate alone. The pull was so strong it almost hurt, but then one of the lead actors called me over to their table, and I went there instead. It made more sense, right? Better for networking, for relationships, and then I heard it, faint, like a whisper underwater, Jonathan. I stopped mid-bite, looked around. No one else had heard anything. They were all laughing about something. Someone's story about their kid's soccer game, but I'd heard my name, clear as day. I excused myself, walked to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and just stood there shaking, because it was happening. He was calling me, right now, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, and I'd almost walked right past it again. That night, I didn't wait until midnight. I went to my trailer at 10 p.m., turned off my phone, locked the door, and I just waited. Prayed. Honestly, I begged. Please, I whispered into the empty trailer. Please show me, teach me. I don't want to miss you anymore. At 11:53 p.m., the air changed. It got thicker somehow, charged with this electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. And then he was there again, standing in the exact same spot as before. You're early, Jesus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I didn't want to risk missing you, I said, and my voice cracked. You're learning, he said. Come, tonight gets harder. He waved his hand, and again the walls dissolved. But this time we weren't in the corridor of doors. We were in a church. A big one, too, one of those mega churches with stadium seating and massive screens and a light show that could rival a concert. The place was packed. Thousands of people, hands raised, singing worship songs. The music was beautiful, the production was flawless, and everyone seemed so engaged, so passionate. This is good, right? I said, looking at Jesus. Look at all these people worshiping you. But Jesus's expression was heartbreaking. He looked like he was watching a funeral. "Watch," he said quietly, and then I started to hear it, his voice calling out names, but not from the stage, not from the speakers, from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Michelle." I saw a woman in the third row, eyes closed, hands raised, singing beautifully. She paused for just a fraction of a second, and I saw this flicker of recognition cross her face. But then the chorus hit its peak, the lights intensified, and she was swept back into the moment. Thomas, a man near the back, looking at his phone between songs. He looked up suddenly, glanced around confused, but then the next song started and whatever he'd felt was drowned out by the opening drums. Rebecca, a teenager in the youth section. She went still, and I saw tears start to form in her eyes. She looked around like she was trying to find the source of something, but her friend grabbed her arm and pulled her into a selfie, and the moment was lost. Jesus was calling them, right here, right now, in the middle of worship, and they couldn't hear him over the music. "Lord," I said, and I was horrified. "They're trying to worship you. They're worshiping the experience of worship," Jesus said, and his voice was heavy with grief. "They're moved by the music, by the lights, by the emotion of the crowd, but they can't hear me when I call their names because they've confused the sound system with my voice." He walked down the aisle and I followed him. As we moved through the crowd, I could see it more clearly now. People were experiencing something, sure. They were feeling something, but when Jesus actually spoke, when he called specific names with specific invitations, it was getting lost in the noise. We moved to the front, where the worship team was playing. They were incredibly talented, genuinely gifted, and I could see that they loved Jesus. They did. But "Daniel," Jesus called, looking at the lead guitarist. The man's fingers stumbled on the strings for just a second. He frowned, shook his head slightly like he was clearing it, and then jumped back into the song. "I've been calling him for 6 weeks," Jesus said to me, calling him to step down from the stage and start a simple worship gathering in his home. Just him, his guitar, and whoever I bring. No lights, no production, just intimacy. But he thinks I want him here, doing this, because this is bigger, more impressive, reaching more people. But isn't that good too? I asked. Isn't it good that he's leading worship here? Jesus looked at me, and the intensity of his gaze made me step back. "Jonathan, when will my people learn that I don't call them to where the crowds are? I call them to where I am, and I'm not always in the building with the best sound system." He walked up onto the stage, standing right next to the pastor who was about to speak. The pastor was a good man, I could see it in his face. Sincere, passionate. He genuinely loved Jesus and wanted to serve him well. The pastor began his sermon. It was good, really good. Stories, illustrations, practical application. The crowd was eating it up, taking notes, nodding along. But then right in the middle of his sermon, Jesus leaned close to him and whispered, "Stop, put down your notes. Tell them what I showed you at 3 a.m. this morning." The pastor paused. I saw his hand move toward his notes, then stop. His expression changed, confusion, uncertainty, and I knew he'd heard something. The actual Jesus was standing right next to him, giving him a direct invitation, and he'd heard it. But then he looked at his notes, looked at the crowd, looked at the screens with his perfect outline displayed, and he made a choice. He kept preaching his prepared sermon. Jesus stepped back from the microphone, and the pain on his face was unbearable to witness. "He heard me," Jesus said quietly. He knew it was me. But he was afraid it would seem unprofessional, afraid he'd lose the thread of his carefully prepared message, afraid of looking foolish in front of thousands of people. "What was the message you wanted him to share?" I asked. "A warning," Jesus said. "A warning that I'm about to shake everything in the church that can be shaken, that the systems and programs and productions they've built aren't going to survive what's coming, that they need to learn to hear my voice in the silence, not just in the sound system, that they need to respond to my personal invitations, not just follow the ministry plans they've mapped out." I felt tears running down my face. He would have lost a lot if he'd done that. His reputation, maybe his position, he would have gained me, Jesus said simply. But he chose the approval of the crowd over obedience to my voice. The scene shifted again. We were now in a small apartment. A woman in her late 60s was sitting in a worn armchair, reading her Bible. The TV was off. Her phone was in another room. It was quiet except for the sound of traffic outside. "Martha," Jesus said, and she heard him. I saw her head come up immediately, her eyes bright and alert. "Yes, Lord?" she whispered. I looked at Jesus in shock. "She heard you. Just like that. She's been practicing for 50 years, Jesus said, and his voice was full of affection. She's learned to create space for my voice, to silence the noise, to wait and listen." I watched as Jesus sat down across from her. She couldn't see him, not like I could, but she knew he was there. I could tell by the way her whole body oriented toward him. "The woman in apartment 3C, Jesus said to her. "She's going to attempt suicide tonight at 11:30. I need you to go knock on her door right now. Bring her the soup you made this morning." Martha didn't hesitate. She stood up, walked to her kitchen, ladled soup into a container, grabbed her keys, and headed for the door. No second guessing, no talking herself out of it, no seeking confirmation. "Lord," I said, watching her go, she's doing it. Just like that. "This is what it looks like to know my voice," Jesus said. "This is what I'm trying to teach my people before October 31st, while I'm still calling loudly and clearly. Because after that date, the season changes." We followed Martha to apartment 3C. She knocked on the door. At first there was no answer, but she knocked. Again, patient and persistent. Finally the door opened. A young woman stood there, eyes red from crying, and I could see the pill bottle in her hand, partially hidden behind her back. "I'm sorry to bother you," Martha said with a warm smile. "I made too much soup, and the Lord told me you might like some. May I come in for just a moment?" The young woman's face crumpled. She started sobbing, and Martha just opened her arms and held her. And I watched as Jesus stood beside them both, his hand on each of their heads, his face radiating joy. "This," Jesus said to me, "this is what I'm calling my people to. Not programs, not productions, not ministries with business plans and budget projections. I'm calling them by name to specific people at specific times for specific purposes. And if they don't learn to hear and respond immediately, they'll miss the moments I've ordained." We were back in that corridor of doors again. Jesus walked me to one door in particular. It was smaller than the others, simpler. The date on it read, the 29th of October 2025. "Tomorrow. This one is yours," Jesus said. My heart started pounding. What is it? What are you calling me to do?" "You'll know when I call your name," he said. "But Jonathan, you need to understand something crucial. When I call you tomorrow, everything in you is going to want to analyze it, to make sure, to seek confirmation, to be wise. But this invitation expires at midnight tomorrow. October 31st begins a new season, and this specific door will close." "Why?" I asked desperately. "Why does it have to be so time-sensitive? Why can't I take time to pray about it too? Because I'm teaching you to trust my voice more than your own understanding." Jesus said, "I'm teaching you that when I call you by name with a specific invitation that is your confirmation, my voice is your wisdom. And if you need to run it by a committee before you'll obey me, then you don't really know my voice at all." He turned to face me fully, and his expression was both fierce and tender. "Jonathan, I'm about to ask you to do something that won't make sense, something that might cost you, something that you won't be able to explain to others in a way that sounds rational or spiritual. And if you miss this moment, if you talk yourself out of it or wait for better circumstances, that specific invitation will close. I'll still use you. I'll still love you. But you'll miss the exact thing I'm calling you to in this exact season." I was shaking. How do I know? How do I know for sure it's you, and not just my own thoughts, or "That's what tomorrow night is for," Jesus said. "Our final meeting. Tomorrow night at midnight, I'm going to give you the test. The way you can always know, beyond doubt, when it's truly me calling your name." But Jonathan, he gripped my shoulders, and the intensity of his presence was almost too much to bear. "You have to respond to tomorrow's invitation before midnight, before October 31st begins, because after that, the training season ends, the season of obvious invitations closes, and the season of subtle calls begins. And if you haven't learned to hear and obey immediately when I call clearly, you'll be lost when I call quietly." "I don't want to miss you," I whispered. "I don't want to miss any more doors." "Then stop asking for confirmation and start recognizing my voice," Jesus said. "Stop seeking the approval of others and start trusting that when I call your name, that's all the permission you need. Stop waiting for perfect circumstances and start understanding that my invitations often require you to move before the path is clear." The trailer materialized around me again. It was 2:47 a.m. My face was wet with tears. My whole body was trembling, and somewhere in my spirit, I could feel it building. Tomorrow, tomorrow Jesus was going to call my name with a specific invitation, and I had until midnight to respond. I didn't know what he was going to ask me to do, but I knew I had a choice to make. The same choice that woman in the grocery store had represented, the same choice the pastor had faced on stage, the same choice Martha had made without hesitation. Would I recognize his voice when he called my name? And when I heard it, would I obey? October 29th. I woke up after maybe an hour of sleep, and I felt like I was crawling out of my skin. Every moment of that day felt like waiting for a test I hadn't studied for. Except this test wasn't about knowledge, it was about something far more terrifying. Obedience. Immediate, unexplainable obedience. I went through the day in a daze. We weren't shooting that day, thank God, because I don't think I could have performed. I stayed in my apartment, tried to read my Bible, tried to pray, but mostly I just paced, waiting, listening. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. Every time I heard a sound in the hallway, I froze. Was this it? Was this the moment? Was Jesus calling my name? But nothing came. Not in the morning, not in the afternoon. The day crawled by in agonizing silence, and with every hour that passed, I felt the weight of midnight approaching. The deadline, the door closing. By 9 p.m., I was a wreck. I kept thinking about what Jesus had said, that I wouldn't be able to explain it to others, that it might cost me something, that it wouldn't make sense. What could he possibly ask me to do? Quit the show? Give away my savings? Move to another country? At 11:30 p.m., I was sitting on my couch, hands shaking, watching the clock on my phone tick toward midnight. 30 minutes left in October 29th. 30 minutes left for Jesus to call my name with this mysterious invitation. And then, at 11:47 p.m., it happened. Not the way I expected, not dramatically, not with visions or dissolving walls. I suddenly thought about my neighbor, Marcus, the guy who lived 3 doors down. We'd exchanged maybe 10 words in the 2 years I'd lived in this building. He was younger than me, maybe late 20s, always had headphones in, always seemed to be in a hurry. And I just had this thought, go knock on his door, right now, tell him I see him. That was it. Just that simple thought dropped into my mind like a stone into still water, and immediately, every part of my brain started screaming objections. It's almost midnight. That's insane. He'll think you're crazy. You don't even know him. What if he's not home? What if he's asleep? What if he thinks you're drunk or having some kind of breakdown? You're a public figure now. What if he records you and puts it online? What if this ruins your reputation? What if... But underneath all that noise, I heard it again. Quieter this time, but unmistakable. Jonathan. My name. My actual name. Spoken in a voice I'd only heard twice before, but now recognized instantly. This was it. This was the invitation. And I had 13 minutes to respond before the door closed forever. I stood up so fast I almost knocked over my coffee table. My hands were trembling as I grabbed my keys. I didn't change out of my sweatpants and old t-shirt, didn't brush my teeth, didn't rehearse what I was going to say. I just walked to my door, opened it, and stood in the hallway, staring down at apartment 3C where Marcus lived. And every logical thought in my head was screaming at me to go back inside, to pray about it more, to wait for a better time, to make sure this was really God and not just my own weird impulses. But I remembered what Jesus had said. If you need to run it by a committee before you'll obey me, then you don't really know my voice at all. I walked to Marcus's door, raised my hand, and knocked. For a moment, nothing, silence, and I started to feel foolish. See, this wasn't God. This was just... The door opened. Marcus stood there, and the first thing I noticed was that he'd been crying. His eyes were red, his face was blotchy, and he was holding his phone in a death grip. "Yeah?" he said, his voice rough. He didn't seem to recognize me, or if he did, he didn't care. And I opened my mouth with absolutely no idea what was going to come out. "I know this is going to sound insane," I said, "but I was sitting in my apartment, and I just felt like I was supposed to come tell you something. And I know we don't know each other, and this is completely weird, but..." I took a breath. "Jesus told me to tell you that he sees you. That's it, that's all I know. He sees you." Marcus's face went completely white. His hand gripped the doorframe like he was about to collapse. "What did you say?" he whispered. Jesus sees you, I repeated, and as I said it, I felt this overwhelming presence, like Jesus was standing right there in the hallway with us. He knows what you're going through. He knows what you're feeling right now, and he wanted you to know that you're not alone. Marcus's legs actually gave out. He slid down against the door frame, sitting on the floor of his entryway, and he started sobbing, deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. I stood there, completely out of my depth, and then I just sat down next to him in the hallway. Didn't say anything, just sat there while he cried. After a few minutes, he looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. I was going to do it, he said. Tonight. I had everything planned. I wrote the note. His voice broke. And then you knocked on my door and said the exact words. The exact words my mom used to say to me before she died. She'd tuck me in every night and say, Jesus sees you, Marcus. No matter what, he sees you. I felt like I couldn't breathe. When did she die? 3 years ago today, he whispered. October 29th, and I couldn't take it anymore. The grief, the loneliness. I thought nobody saw me. I thought nobody cared. I thought even God had forgotten about me. We sat there in that hallway until almost 1 a.m. I didn't preach at him, didn't give him some theological explanation. I just listened while he talked about his mom, about his pain, about how alone he'd felt. And then, when he was ready, I asked if I could pray with him. And we prayed together, right there on the floor of that hallway, and I felt Jesus so present it was like he was physically sitting there with us. When I finally got back to my apartment at 1:30 a.m., I was exhausted and wired at the same time. I'd done it. I'd heard Jesus call my name, and I'd responded. I'd walked through the door before it closed. But I also knew Jesus had said he'd meet me at midnight, that he was going to give me the test, the way to always know when it's his voice. I sat on my couch, and I waited. And at 2:17 a.m., the air changed again, and Jesus was standing in my living room. You did it, he said, and the pride in his voice made tears spring to my eyes. You heard my voice, and you obeyed immediately, even though it didn't make sense, even though you were afraid, even though every logical part of your mind was screaming at you to stop. I almost didn't, I admitted. Lord, I almost talked myself out of it. But you didn't, Jesus said, and because you responded, Marcus is alive. Not just physically, I'm bringing him back to life spiritually. This is the beginning of his restoration. And Jonathan, you were the door I invited you through. This was your October 29th invitation. But what about the test? I asked. You said you were going to show me how to always know when it's your voice. Jesus sat down across from me, and his expression grew serious. This is what I need my people to understand before this season ends, he said. The church has taught you to test everything by lining it up with Scripture, by seeking multiple confirmations, by making sure it's wise and practical. And while Scripture is my word and must never be contradicted, most of my specific, personal invitations aren't going to have a verse you can point to as proof. He leaned forward. So here's the test. Jonathan, here's how you know when it's truly me calling your name. Ask yourself these 3 questions and answer them honestly. I grabbed my phone to take notes, but Jesus shook his head. You won't need to write this down, you'll remember it, because I'm writing it on your heart right now. He held up one finger. First, does this call require you to trust me more than your own understanding? My invitations will almost always ask you to step beyond what feels safe or logical. If it's something you can fully explain and defend to everyone around you, it's probably not me, it's just your own good idea. My voice calls you into dependence. He held up a second finger. Second, does this call require immediate action, or is it something you can endlessly deliberate about? When I call you by name to a specific assignment, there's usually a time element, a kairos moment, a divine appointment. If you can put it off indefinitely while you pray about it more, you're probably just afraid to obey what you already know I'm asking. He held up a third finger. Third, does this call benefit someone else more than it benefits you? My invitations will almost always cost you something: time, comfort, reputation, money, while blessing someone else. If the call is primarily about making your life better, easier, or more impressive, it's probably not my voice. My kingdom operates in reverse of the world's values. The greatest among you must be servant of all. I sat there, letting those 3 questions sink in, and I realized the invitation to knock on Marcus's door had met all 3 criteria perfectly. It required me to trust Jesus more than my own logic. It required immediate action before midnight, and it cost me comfort and potential embarrassment while saving Marcus's life. Lord, I said slowly, if people applied these 3 questions to most of what the church calls ministry, most of it would fail the test, Jesus said quietly, because most of what my people are doing, they're doing for themselves, for their own sense of purpose, for their own reputation, for their own kingdom, and they've convinced themselves it's for me because it involves religious activity. He stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the dark city. October 31st marks the end of a season, Jonathan. In this season that's ending, I've been calling my people loudly, clearly, by name. I've been giving obvious opportunities, opening unmistakable doors, speaking in ways that are hard to miss. This has been a season of training, teaching my people to recognize my voice and respond immediately. He turned back to me. But the new season that begins after October 31st will require a different kind of listening. The invitations will be more subtle, the doors will be less obvious. The calls will require more faith, more discernment, more courage. And those who haven't learned to hear and obey in this season, when I'm calling loudly, will be completely lost in the next season, when I call quietly. What should people do? I asked desperately. The people watching this, what do they need to know? Jesus' expression grew intense. Tell them to stop right now and ask me, what are you calling me to that I've been ignoring? Tell them to sit in silence, real silence, not music or podcasts or even worship songs, and listen. Tell them that I've probably been calling their name for weeks or months, and they've been explaining it away as random thoughts or anxiety or distraction. He stepped closer to me. Tell them that if they're seeing this before October 31st, it's not an accident. I'm calling them by name right now, and the invitation I'm extending to them is time-sensitive, not because I'm playing games or being manipulative, but because I'm trying to teach them to recognize my voice and respond immediately, before the season shifts and the training wheels come off. What happens to the people who don't learn? I asked. The ones who miss their invitations? Jesus' face grew sad. They'll spend the next season wondering why they feel so disconnected from me, why their prayers feel empty, why they can't hear my voice anymore. And they'll blame me, they'll think I've gone silent or that I'm angry with them. But the truth is, I'm still speaking. I'm just not shouting anymore. I'm whispering. And they never learned to hear the whisper because they kept ignoring the shout. He put his hand on my shoulder. But it's not too late. For you, for Marcus, for anyone watching this, it's not too late. I'm still calling. The door of October 29th may have closed, but there are still hours left before October 31st. Still time to learn. Still time to respond. What do I do now? I asked. What's my next step? You share this, Jesus said simply. You tell people what I've shown you. You explain the 3 questions. You warn them that the season is shifting. And then you keep listening for your own name. Because, Jonathan, this wasn't your only invitation. This was just the test. The real assignments are coming. He started to fade, but his voice remained clear. And remember, when I call your name, you don't need anyone's permission to obey me. My voice is your authorization. My invitation is your confirmation. Trust me more than you trust your own understanding. Move immediately when I say move. And always, always ask, who does this benefit more, me and my kingdom, or you and your comfort? Then he was gone, and I was alone in my living room at 3:33 a.m., knowing that everything had changed. So here's what I need you to hear. If you're watching this before October 31st, Jesus is calling your name right now, this very moment. And I know you feel it, that pull, that nudge, that thought you keep dismissing as random or weird or impractical. That's him. That's his voice, calling you to something specific. And I need you to stop right now. Actually pause this video and ask him, what are you calling me to that I've been ignoring? Then sit in silence, real silence, no music, no distractions, just you and him. And listen, when he shows you, and he will show you, apply the 3 questions. Does it require you to trust him more than your own understanding? Does it require immediate action? Does it benefit someone else more than you? If the answer to all 3 is yes, then you know. That's his voice. That's your invitation. And you have until this season ends to respond. I don't know what he's calling you to. Maybe it's knocking on a neighbor's door. Maybe it's quitting a job that's slowly killing your soul. Maybe it's starting something new that terrifies you. Maybe it's ending something that everyone else thinks you should keep doing. Maybe it's reaching out to someone you've been avoiding. Maybe it's saying yes to something that doesn't make sense on paper. But whatever it is, hear me, his voice calling your name is all the confirmation you need. You don't need to run it by a committee. You don't need to make a pros and cons list. You don't need to wait until the circumstances are perfect, or until you feel ready, or until it makes sense to everyone around you. When Jesus calls your name with a specific invitation, that is your permission, that is your authorization, that is your wisdom. And if you miss it, if you explain it away, or talk yourself out of it, or wait for better timing, that specific door will close. He'll still love you, he'll still use you, but you'll miss the exact thing he was calling you to in this exact season. Marcus would be dead right now if I'd waited, if I'd prayed about it more, if I'd sought counsel, if I'd been wise and practical. But he's alive, and his restoration is beginning, because I heard Jesus call my name, and I responded immediately, even though I was terrified and it didn't make sense. So I'm going to ask you one more time, what is Jesus calling you to right now that you've been ignoring? Write it in the quest. Comments. Not for me, for you. Make it real. Make it concrete. Declare it, and then do it. Today, before midnight, October 31st, before the season shifts and the training ends and the whispers begin. Because I promise you, on the other side of your obedience is someone who needs exactly what Jesus is sending you to give them. A Marcus waiting for someone to knock on their door and say, Jesus sees you. Don't miss your invitation. Don't miss your door. Don't miss his voice calling your name. The clock is ticking. The season is ending. But you still have time. So what are you going to do? If you're a true believer, if you're ready to hear his voice and obey immediately, subscribe right now. Let me know I'm not alone in this. Let me know there are others out there who are learning to trust his voice more than their own understanding. And tell me in the comments, what is he calling you to? I'll be reading every single comment. I'll be praying for you by name, because Jesus sees you. He knows your name, and he's calling. Will you answer?